Good morning, everyone. Hi, great crowd. Thanks for coming. My name is Brian Borum. I am your track host for today. I am going to do very little other than to introduce your speakers. I do want to say I think VS Code is incredibly cool. So a little biased there, maybe. So let me introduce Ivan Towlson and Ralph Squillace.
In the beginning, there was the command line. All things were made by it, and without it was not anything made that was made. And the command line shineth in the engineering department, and the engineering department comprehended it not. Good morning, I'm Ivan Towlson. I'm a software developer at Microsoft. This is Ralph Squillace. He is my PM at Microsoft. I don't know what PMs do apart from interject comments about SharePoint, but that's probably, he's here to help. So the conventional wisdom in the Kubernetes community is, and indeed in a lot of the Linux community, is that developers love command lines. Engineers love command lines because they can be really productive with them. They can rattle out these arcane incantations. They can string them together into bash scripts. Life is good. But it neglects a significant constituency. Not everybody is adept with all the tools that we're adept with, or that the elite developers are adept with. We've talked about, yesterday Gabe talked about democratizing service mesh. And what I want to talk about today is democratizing that development, that engineering experience for people who are not adept with the command line tools, or do not wish to become adept with the command line tools, or do not wish to become adept with every nuance of the command line tools. So command line tools sometimes fall short of GUIs in several ways. One of them is discoverability, the ability to sort of see what options you have. The reason that we have window and menuing systems, for example, is so that people can discover commands incrementally rather than having to figure them out through a help system or by trial and error or by reading documentation. GUIs can help with visualization, with seeing relationships between things. Even Git, the supreme command line tool, the supreme obscure command line tool, comes with Git K, because sometimes people just need to see what's going on. And GUIs can often be more context aware. They can integrate things in a way that one part of the workflow is aware of the other part of the workflow, that you're focusing on this particular thing at the time. Command lines are often quite stateless. Each invocation is kind of separate, whereas in a GUI you may have, say, a document open that you're focusing on, and the tooling around that document can know this is what the developer is working on. And so this is a comment from Brendan, one of the founders of Kubernetes who now works at Microsoft, that from the blog post announcing the 1.0 of the product I'm about to tell you about. This is, again, tying with this theme of democratizing Kubernetes engineering, making it accessible to everybody, not just to those, to the expert practitioners. And the reality is that nobody lives entirely on the command line. Or maybe, who still uses ed for editing? Wow, tough crowd. So, okay, I think I can assert this with confidence then. You also live in your editor, whether that is Vim or Emacs or VS Code or Atom or whatever. And if you don't live only on the command line, if you don't do your Kubernetes work, you don't live on your command line, you should be able to do things in your editor. You should be able to, instead of having to do Kubernetes solely on the command line, you should be able to do that in your editor as well. And now you can, though conditions apply. And that link will take you to somewhere you can install it if you are using VS Code. So we have built an extension for Visual Studio Code that you can install from Marketplace. It is fully open source, 100% open source. I can show you the code. Actually, I'm not going to show you the code because some of it's a bit ugly. But I can show you that you can raise bugs against us, and people do. We take pull requests, and as I say, all of that source code is available. So if you want to make modifications, then you absolutely can do. If you want to see how it works, you absolutely can do. It works with any Kubernetes. It is driven off your kubeconfig. It uses kubectl or one of those inferior tools like kubecontrol or kubectl or kubectl. And a little bit is done with the JavaScript API. But again, these are all open source components. They are all cloud agnostic Kubernetes core components. There are no cloud specific components apart from things that are used for cloud-specific provisioning, like, for example, merging a cloud config into a kube config, or creating a cluster or anything like that. So obviously there's some cloud bits there, but the core of it, all of the work you do on a day-to-day, operation-by-operation basis, that is all pure Kubernetes, 100% open source, 100% cloud agnostic. And it integrates with SharePoint. No, it doesn't integrate with SharePoint. He's not rising to it. All right, so what does this mean for you as engineers? It means you've got something which is now context-aware. It can look at the project that you're working on and make assumptions based on that. It can operate, it knows what you're working on, it can deal with that. We've built it so that it's version-aware. So if you've got multiple Kubernetes clusters of different versions, it can pull down the right version of kubectl to work with any given cluster, which makes life a bit easier if the clusters span a significant range of versions. It's aware of common tool chains, so it knows about Git and Docker, and it can use that, for example, to move through version history to synchronize with your cluster, or to build stuff in the background so that you don't need to worry about doing the multiple steps. And it is task-aware. It's aware of some of the common tasks that are higher level than those individual Git or kubectl commands. All right, so let's take a look. So, does that come up? Can people see that okay? I can't make it a whole lot bigger, unfortunately, without losing too much screen space, but hopefully that will be all right with people. So what you can see there is we've got a cluster view on the left-hand side. It's listing all of the clusters in my kube config. And the active one I can expand, and I can start to browse through some of the stuff that's on it. For example, I can see that I've got an Nginx deployment there, and if I open that up, I can see the pods underneath that. Or I can click on the deployment itself, and I can bring up the corresponding YAML. So this gives us a very quick way of looking around what's in the cluster and looking at some of the resources that are there, looking at some of the details. Where it starts to add a bit more value is that this is that encapsulation of some of those common workflows, some of those things that you sometimes want, that sometimes take multiple commands. For example, if I want to, I've got here a very simple application that reticulates splines, which is an important task. And at the moment, all I've got for that is a JavaScript file and a Docker file. I've not created a YAML manifest. I've not even built, well, actually, I have already built it, but that's just to save time. So, for example, I can do a Kubernetes run on that, and it will look at what am I working on? Well, I'm in a directory. There's a Docker file in that directory, so I will build that Docker file. Come on, yep, there we go. I'll build that Docker file. I will push the resulting image to Docker Hub.
Fortunately, we're in the networking room.
Yeah, this is a very network-dependent demo. And I will then create a deployment. I will do a kubectl run on that, using that image that has been pushed. And if I now go back to the viewer and do a refresh, then you can see I've now got that demo workspace coming up. And I can start to work with that. I can sort of dive into the pods, for example, and I can very easily follow the logs that are being emitted from there, for example, for diagnostic purposes. And you can see those as the splines get reticulated, that ticks over. We've also got an experience for a richer experience for filtering logs and filtering and managing your logs, though that currently doesn't work on the live stream. It only works on if you do a show logs. But it's still, it can be useful if that's what you need. And we can also, again, if you want to do diagnostics on it, we can very quickly terminal into it. And it's figured out, it's just testing what shells are available on there. And I think bash should be on there. Yep, so it's inferred bash. And for example, I can now do a ls and I can see what's been deployed into that. And obviously I can do further work in there. Another thing that we can do, which again is sometimes a little bit of a fiddly workflow at the command line, is port forwarding, where if I want to port forward into there, I can just right-click there. I don't need to do any mucking around with copying of names. I can just click port forward. It'll prompt me for which ports I want to forward, and it will then just do it. And then there's YAML. I'm told that everybody loves YAML, just like everybody loves the command line.
SharePoint's better, but.
And we tried to give you a bit of help working with that YAML. For example, we can give you tooltips on YAML files. Here, for example, if I want to see what an image pull policy is, I can just hover over it and see what that's doing. And if I get myself a live object, there we go. Actually, let's grab a different one. Let's find one of these pods. So again, I've got some tools that can help you to navigate around. For example, this is a pod that was created as a result of a job, and I can control-click on that to navigate to the job. That job was created by a cron job, and I can again navigate to the parents. You've got these little convenience features to help you find your way around. We can also save and edit this. So for example, I can bring that up, that deployment stuff. I can save that, and it will appear now as a file in the file system. I can edit, for example, edit that, apply it, so I can make changes that way. So it's a very fluid workflow between what's in the live cluster and what's on your system. We can also help with the workflow of figuring out whether things are up to date. For example, is my local manifest up to date with the cluster, or are we out of sync? So if I come back here and I look at that, I can maybe change that, and then I can do a kdiff, and that will compare against the live YAML in the cluster, and you can see, well, okay, some of this is nonsense because it's just metadata that's been added as a result of the deployment and it's not interesting. But I can see there is an actual diff. I can see that what I've got locally is out of sync with the cluster. And if I was, for example, debugging, there's also a Kubernetes, we have a sync command, which allows you to sync your working copy. It will look at what Git revision was deployed into the cluster and sync your local copy. We'll check out that revision into your working copy. And of course, if you're going to use Kubernetes, then there's a good chance you're going to be using Helm. We've got some to help us for that as well. There's a browser here for your Helm repos, where you can, for example, you can fetch these into a local chart, fetch it into your local project, or you can, for example, just you can install them directly, or you can inspect them, or whatever. We've also got a feature where you can take, again, a live object, right-click that, and convert that to a Helm template. And you'll see I've got a chart in there. And you can see it's put in it's templated some of the boilerplate stuff. And from this point on, you can go edit it and make it a fully functioning Helm template with all the parameterization that you need.
Ivan, if you show that one more time, if you would show that one more time. Just another quick point is that although that's very, very useful, especially because Helm is common, but Helm is also not used by other people. If you go ahead and click the little arrow next to the Helm repos, you'll find that vanishes down at the bottom and gets out of your way as well. So you have an easy way to select your visible portion of your working environment.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks. You can get that in SharePoint too, by the way.
Nah.
All right, so this sounds great, and you can download it from there. Except we have this super cool plugin that we built, and we'd really like to share. We've got this really neat tool that we'd like to be able to display against various objects on that tree. We've got some CRD, some operator that's specific to our domain, to what we do, that's got particular operations that we'd like to surface, some custom commands that we'd like to surface through the GUI. We've got this very specific kubectl command that we use all the time, even though nobody else does. Or we've got this cloud we want to be able to provision from. And I know this doesn't apply to any of you, but we've got this super special set of conventions and table layouts and secrets and so on, which defines our project structure and how we do everything, which is carefully encoded in 4,361 lines of bash.
By the way, the program manager put that on a SharePoint site so that he wouldn't forget it.
Now, we take PRs. We love PRs. So if there's things that you think are going to be generally useful to the community, then please send a PR. That's lovely. But we're not going to take a PR for 4,361 lines of bash that contain your private secrets. Call me an old fuddy-duddy, but you know. So you live in your world. You live in a world that's specific to you. You customize your editor in a way that's specific to you, and you run Kubernetes in a way that is specific to you, to your team, to the tools that you use, to the industry that you work in, to the workflows that you use in your workplace, to the way you lay out projects, to your conventions. So you should be able to extend Visual Studio Code in your own way, with your extensions, to suit your needs. And as of last week, you can now do that, building on top of the Kubernetes extension via an API that we now provide and document. And you can get information about that API from that link there. So you can write extensions that encapsulate things that your team does. You can write extensions to encapsulate tools that you use or that you write and provide to the community. You can write extensions that are useful to people working in your industry. You can write extensions that are specific to your workflows or your project layout or your commission, that encapsulate your team's knowledge, that encapsulate that 4,361-line bash script. Because that way, we can scale this stuff a lot better than everything has to funnel through me or other maintainers of the project. And we're already seeing this happening. Is Steve in the audience somewhere? Steve, could you stand up, please? Steve, as you can see, is from Red Hat. You can tell by the red hat he is not wearing. So Red Hat have implemented, they've just released, I believe, the OpenShift Connect for Visual Studio Code, which is a whole bunch of utilities for working with OpenShift clusters. And they've integrated that with a Kubernetes extension so that OpenShift clusters will be visually distinguished and will show things using OpenShift terminology like projects and routes rather than namespaces and ingresses and stuff like that. So that will give you kind of that customized view of those OpenShift clusters. There's an extension for Linkerd, the Linkerd service mesh, which allows you to, you can very easily right-click a cluster, say, is this cluster ready for Linkerd? If so, I'm going to right-click, I'm going to install it, and you can view the meshed components. And there's an extension which I'm told by Ralph is of supremely high quality.
I wrote this one.
Weave scope, which is it's really neat. So with this one, you can install Weave scope from its Helm chart. So you've got a cluster, you just right-click, install Weave scope, and you can also jump. You can go to any point in that tree, right-click, and say, I want to see this resource in Weave scope, and it will pop open a browser on that particular resource. So it will set up the port forward for you, it will figure out the URL for you, and it will open the browser at that point.
That's right.
I've been working on a sample on something which I've not yet released, but something for access management and security, which is built around the RACS and kubectl who can tools that have been contributed to the community by Cornelius Weig and Liz Rice. And that allows you to right-click on things and say, who can modify these? Who's got permissions to do things to these? And the folks at Windmill Engineering, they have a product called Tilt, which is a rapid inner-loop development experience. And they've started work on integrating that with Visual Studio Code. Is Dan around? Okay, Windmill Engineering, they've got a booth down in the sponsor showcase, so drop in on them and they'll be delighted to show you Tilt and their extension. And another one that I'm noodling with, but again haven't released yet, is a more advanced log tailing experience using a tool called Stern. At the moment that's a command line tool. That will allow you to view logs across multiple containers, across multiple pods in a much more a much broader way. And of course, whatever you come up with, because the API is open, it's documented, it's public, it's in the marketplace, anybody can use it. There's some samples out there, again, they're linked from there. These are kind of minimal things that will just help you to get started with the API and figure out what's going on. All right. So now, at the risk of making a complete fool of myself.
Too late. I had to.
He's adding value. That's what they do. All right. So we're going to kick off. We're going to try to write a VS Code extension in the last 10 minutes of this talk. And this is actually something I started doing yesterday because I got frustrated with something that wasn't in the core extension. I didn't have a way to right-click a deployment and go, I want to expose this as an external service. I just want to get my Nginx thing out to the outside world. I thought, I must have done that at some point, but apparently I hadn't. So let's do that now. So Yocode, this is running a Yeoman template. This is just a standard way of getting started with the Visual Studio extension. I'm going to use TypeScript because JavaScript fries my brain. Kate's expose, all sorts of nonsense here. All right, and that's going to run npm install and network gods be kind.
It's the networking room. We're good.
All right, the networking track, yes.
It's the networking room.
Yes, how could it fail? All right, so we'll go down there and code dot. All right, so this has created for me a standard starter. This is all standard Visual Studio Code template material. And we're going to need to do some customization of this. The first thing that I'm going to need to do is to say that this depends on the base extension. So I need to go into package.json, and we'll add an extension dependency on a long and magic string, which is the best kind of string to be. I should have let Ralph do the coding.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is where I add value for sure.
All right, so that's saying that this extension is going to depend on the core extension because it's going to sit in the tree. So it's actually, if you want to have this, you've got to have the core extension first. And that just means if somebody goes, great, I want to expose services, then it will drag, and they install this from the marketplace, then it will drag in the core extension if they've not had that already. The next thing I'm going to do is install a NPM library that gives me more convenient access to the API. You don't actually need this, but it's just a lot easier if you do. So npm install VS Code, Kubernetes tools API. We should have given this extension a shorter name.
Hey, I'm not typing.
What about SharePoint?
SharePoint, even that's too long.
Fair enough. All right, so that's added. There we go. So that's added the NPM package. All right, so now I'm going to go into the extension, or no, I can't do that yet. So I'm going to need to. So the template generates a sample command, which says hello world. And that's not quite what I want to achieve. I mean, it's nice, it's polite, but it's not actually what I want to do. So I'll just I'll define a.
Well, one thing to note here is normally in example code, which isn't generated here, you'll find a little bracket that makes it obvious. You know, it'll be in like a little open bracket, closed bracket. That'll make it obvious that you're supposed to replace it. In this case, it actually says extension dot something. You're supposed to replace that with your extension name. So it's an easy thing to sort of bang your head against when we'll see if we can get that boilerplate changed.
Now, because this one sits on something in the tree, I need to tell Visual Studio Code where it sits. So I need to tell it basically what's kind of the view context, what's the identifier of the thing that it should be displayed against. So I'm going to say that the expose command is added to, and this is a bit of an incantation. You'll notice there's quite a few incantations go along. So I just want to do a match on a pattern that's defined by the core extension, which is VS Kubernetes dot resource, and in this case I want it to be for deployment.
The great thing about this is you're mixing and matching a magic incantation with character escaping, which is really like that's a professional career right there.
All right, and for the time being, I'm just going to say I'm still going to say I just want the expose command to display the hello world box, so I can make sure I've not messed anything up, like I did every time I practiced this demo. So I can run this in the debugger.
How'd you do that?
I pressed F5, and
okay.
I guess you're on some kind of crazy other box.
Yeah.
Because everyone here uses Windows, right?
So you notice he's running on Windows right now? Okay, so I don't have a Windows machine despite his attacks over SharePoint. So I'm not sure why he's doing this, but he is.
All right. So you may need, your debug key may be different on different operating systems, but on Windows it's F5, but it's also, it's a standard debug command for Visual Studio Code. So if I can go to a deployment, let's have a look here. There's Nginx. If I right-click that, exposes external service. I've got a hello world. So I've managed to hook up a command to the tree. Does that make sense so far?
Just to be clear, that was what, maybe 4 or 5 minutes of explication? So if he's doing this on his own, he does the explication on his own. I've been on a video chat with him when he does this. But in reality, it's about 1 minute, 2 minutes to get your stuff up and running.
All right. Now, in reality, I actually need to know which service I'm going to expose. So Visual Studio Code, when you do a right-click, a context menu thing in a tree, VS Code will give you an object that represents the thing that was right-clicked to launch the command. Now, I don't know much about that thing because I'm on the outside looking in. So I'm just going to have to figure out what it is. So I need to pass that, I need to accept that as an argument to my command handler, okay? So.
No pressure in the typing fingers here at all.
No, it's all going fantastically. All right. So I don't know what VS Code is going to throw at me, but I do know that I can ask the Kubernetes extension, which is where it came from, I can ask the Kubernetes extension, what the hell is this thing? What is this crazy thing that VS Code is giving me? So now I need to use the Kubernetes extension API. So import star as Kate's from there. Now, so I want to ask for the Cluster Explorer all of the interfaces of version so we can keep them stable. And
just really quickly, in this case, the Cluster Explorer is the visual tree.
Yeah, thank you. That's
I'm here for you.
I'm going to do some really fancy error handling by just dumping the user out of the command. As I say, you can build better user experiences around this, and oh my goodness, you should. So I now want to ask the extension to resolve that command target. I want to know what it is. So that's going to tell me if it's a node in the tree. And by node, it means a node in the visual tree, not a Kubernetes node, not a physical or virtual node in the cluster. And I just need to check whether this is actually what I expected. So that's just sanity checking. All right, so now I can use the name of that thing to identify the deployment. So my kubectl command is going to be expose deployment treenode.name -- type equals load balancer -- port equals, I'm going to need a port. So we better prompt for that. Show input box. Oops. And the user interface gets better and better the closer I get to running out of time. There's our command, that's looking good. Now I need to run that. So now I can again ask the extension for a bit of help on this. Const kc equals kates.extension dot kubectl.v1, and again, if not, kc dot, oops, await. If it's not available, then we'll just return. And now, const result equals kc.api.invoke command cmd.
So we're at 4 minutes from when you stopped doing the scaffolding. So it's only been typing for 4 more minutes.
So if that didn't work, so this is a shell class that's following the usual shell conventions. Oops. Just add more sprinklings of await. VSCode.window.show error message. I'm really running low on time, aren't I? Else VSCode.window.show.
Now I'm taking bets whether it'll finish right before the end of the...
All right. Is this going to work first time? Is it going to work first time? Is it not going to work first time?
The cynics among you are correct.
Have you spotted a mistake? If it doesn't work, I'll blame it on the network. That's always a safe option.
They turned it off just now, right?
All right. Exposes external service. It's prompted me for a port. Let's expose that on port 80. So I did that so that you could see the debugging experience.
So, okay, well, who raised their hands for not first time? But the interesting, so first of all, you are right, and you should come to the booth afterwards so we can walk through this again. And you can torture him directly. That would be such great pleasure for me. To the point where I might pay you. But the interesting thing is also that it shows you immediately the debugging ability for even catching the simple errors right away so that you can immediately iterate, turn around, and do it again.
Oh, I've made a very silly mistake. A very silly mistake, Ralph. Very silly.
Oh, you...
So TypeScript, why don't you save me from myself?
Save us, TypeScript.
Save me, TypeScript.
All right, last pressure moment. We've got Brian, the enforcer, over here, so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm not allowed to commercialize this talk either. He stops me if I do that. So by SharePoint.
So I'm betting this one's going to work.
All right. Exposes external service. Did I need to get stopped?
Yay.
There?
Listen. So I'm really pleased that he got it done before we finished.
Before we got thrown
And he's going to show you that it's open. But we'll let you go. Thanks for having a look. We're going to roll down to the Microsoft booth if you want to come down there. We're going to go through all of the extensions. Steve with Red Hat will have the OpenShift stuff at his booth. You can see that. Weave, we'll show the Weave, Linkerd, and we'll code up new fun things. So thank you very much.
Thank you.